What if I told you that on the afternoon of June 8th, Israeli fighter jets were fueled, armed, and sitting on a runway, ready to launch a massive strike on Iran, and the only thing that stopped them was a single phone call from Donald Trump? And what if I told you that the reason Trump had to make that call in the first place, the reason the entire situation had spiraled to that point, was a grudge that started in November 2020. This is not a story about two allies disagreeing on strategy. This is a story about two deeply transactional men, one who needs a deal and one who needs a war, who started a conflict together and are now tearing each other apart over how it ends. And the fallout from 3 days in June the 6th, 7th, and 8th may have permanently changed the US-Israel relationship as we know it. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why Trump told Netanyahu, his supposed closest ally, you'll be on your own very soon, and why Netanyahu had no choice but to stand down. To understand how we got to a point where the leader of the free world is calling his closest ally effing crazy on a podcast, we have to rewind. Let's go back to the days of Trump's first term. 2017 to 2020, a simpler time. Back then, the Trump-Netanyahu relationship was the geopolitical equivalent of a rom-com. Trump gave Netanyahu everything he could ever want. He moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. It was a veritable smorgasbord of diplomatic gifts. Netanyahu, in return, offered the kind of lavish public praise that Trump requires to sustain his life force. But even in those golden years, there were cracks. The relationship was always transactional. It wasn't built on a shared ideological foundation. It was built on mutual utility. And when that utility faded, so did the warmth. The first major fracture occurred in January 2020, surrounding the assassination of Iranian Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani. Trump thought this was going to be a joint US-Israeli operation, but at the 11th hour, Israel backed out. Trump felt used. He later complained that Israel did not do the right thing, and that Netanyahu let him down. But the real betrayal, the one that apparently still keeps Trump up at night, happened in November 2020. When Joe Biden won the 2020 election, Netanyahu was one of the first world leaders to congratulate him. To a normal politician, this is basic diplomacy. To Donald Trump, this was an act of high treason. In a 2021 interview, Trump famously recounted the incident, saying, "The first person who congratulated him was Bibi Netanyahu, that man that I did more for than any other person I dealt with. I haven't spoke to him since. F him." Yes, that is a direct quote. Diplomacy at its finest. So fast forward to Trump's return to the White House. The bromance was dead, replaced by a cold, calculating alliance of convenience. They needed each other, but they certainly didn't trust each other. And that lack of trust was about to be put to the ultimate test. In late February 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive coordinated attack on Iran. It was the beginning of what Trump called Operation Epic Fury. Catchy name, right? It sounds like a new flavor of energy drink. Initially, Trump and Netanyahu seemed to be in lockstep. The stated goals were ambitious: dismantle Iran's nuclear program, destroy its missile arsenal, and perhaps even topple the regime. In the opening barrage, the US even managed to assassinate Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. But very quickly, it became apparent that the two leaders had wildly different definitions of victory. Trump, ever the businessman, wanted a quick win. He wanted to hit Iran hard, bring them to the negotiating table, secure a new, better deal, and then declare himself the greatest peacemaker in history. He also had domestic politics to worry about. The war was causing gas prices to spike, and his base was getting restless. Trump had promised to avoid endless wars, and this one was starting to look decidedly endless. Netanyahu, on the other hand, had a completely different calculus. He is a prime minister fighting for his political survival, facing elections later in the year. For Netanyahu, a quick deal with Iran that left the regime intact and Hezbollah armed in Lebanon was a political death sentence. He needed a total undeniable military military victory. He needed to vanquish Iran and its proxies, no matter how long it took. So you have Trump desperate to make a deal and get out, and Netanyahu desperate to keep fighting and win. It's the classic unstoppable force meeting the immovable object, and the collision happened in Lebanon. While the main event was supposed to be Iran, the sideshow in Lebanon quickly became the main attraction. Hezbollah, Iran's proxy, had been firing rockets into northern Israel. Israel naturally fired back. But as Trump started trying to negotiate a ceasefire with Iran, the fighting in Lebanon became a massive liability. Iran made it very clear there would be no peace deal with the U.S. unless Israel stopped bombing Lebanon. Trump, eager for his deal, told Netanyahu to cool it. Netanyahu, eager to eliminate Hezbollah and appease his right-wing coalition, ignored him. The tension boiled over in early June. Netanyahu, facing domestic pressure to respond to Hezbollah attacks, announced plans for a major military operation, including airstrikes on Hezbollah strongholds in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Trump was livid. He saw Netanyahu's actions as a direct threat to his carefully orchestrated negotiations. This led to a phone call on Monday, June 1st, where Trump reportedly demanded that Netanyahu back down. It was during this period that Trump allegedly called Netanyahu effing crazy and claimed that the prime minister would be in prison if it weren't for him. Netanyahu, realizing he couldn't afford an open rupture with the US president, briefly relented. He called off the Beirut strikes, but the underlying fundamental disagreement remained. Trump wanted peace, Netanyahu wanted war, and it was only a matter of time before the powder keg exploded. And explode it did. Welcome to the weekend of June 6th to 8th, 2026. The weekend the Trump-Netanyahu alliance finally shattered. It started on Friday, June 6th. Despite Trump's previous warnings, Israel conducted strikes across southern Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah commanders. Iran, watching this unfold, decided it had enough. On Sunday, June 7th, Iran launched a barrage of ballistic missiles directly at northern Israel. It was the first direct strike since a fragile ceasefire had taken hold in April. Iran stated clearly that this was retaliation for the Israeli strikes in Lebanon, and warned that if Israel continued its aggression, more missiles would follow. Now imagine you are Donald Trump. You are trying to negotiate a historic peace deal, and your ally just provoked the enemy into launching ballistic missiles. You are, to put it mildly, perturbed. Trump immediately got on the phone with Netanyahu. The message was clear. Do not retaliate. Stand down. Let me handle this. According to reports, Netanyahu pushed back. The Iranians violated our sovereignty, he reportedly said. We have to draw a red line. Trump, however, was not in the mood for red lines. He reportedly told Netanyahu that Washington would not grant Israel a green light for retaliation. The call ended with ambiguity. Trump thought he had convinced Netanyahu to hold off. Netanyahu apparently thought he had made his case for a strike. So what did Israel do? They struck back. Early Monday morning, June 8th, Israeli forces hit Iranian air defense systems and a petrochemical plant. They also struck a Hezbollah headquarters in Beirut's southern suburbs. This was a direct defiance of the President of the United States, and Donald Trump does not handle defiance well. Which brings us to the climax of our story. The afternoon of Monday, June 8th. Israel and Iran had just traded blows. The region was teetering on the brink of an all-out uncontrolled war. And inside the Kiryat, Israel's military headquarters in Tel Aviv, intense discussions were underway. Netanyahu had just approved another even larger operation against Iran, scheduled for late that afternoon. The aircrafts were literally fueled and ready for takeoff. And then the phone rang. It was Donald Trump. We don't have the exact transcript of this call, but based on multiple reports from Israeli and U.S. officials, it was less of a conversation and more of an ultimatum. Trump, furious that his previous warnings had been ignored, reportedly told Netanyahu in no uncertain terms to halt the operation immediately. He was trying to salvage the peace talks, and Israel's continued bombardment was making that impossible. According to Trump's own recounting of events to Axios, he delivered a chilling warning to Israeli Prime Minister. I said, Bibi, you better be careful or you will be on your own very soon. You will be on your own. For an Israeli Prime Minister, those are perhaps the 5 most terrifying words in the English language. Israel relies heavily on U.S. military aid, diplomatic cover, and strategic deterrence. To lose that backing in the middle of a multi-front war could be catastrophic. Faced with this explicit threat of abandonment, Netanyahu caved. He ordered the military to stand down. The planned afternoon strike was aborted, leading to massive confusion among the Israeli high command. Trump had successfully forced a pause in the fighting. He then took to his social media platform, Truth Social, and declared Israel and Iran must immediately stop shooting. He publicly asserted his dominance, telling the Financial Times, "I call all the shots." So where does this leave us? For the moment, the guns are quiet. Iran and Israel have both agreed to a temporary halt in direct attacks. Trump is back to touting the imminent success of his peace negotiations, claiming a deal is just around the corner. But the damage to the U.S.-Israel relationship is profound. The illusion of a unified front has been shattered. The world now knows that Trump and Netanyahu are pursuing fundamentally incompatible goals. Trump wants a deal, Netanyahu wants a decisive military victory. Netanyahu is now in an incredibly precarious position. He is squeezed between a U.S. president who is threatening to cut him loose and a domestic political base that is demanding he finish the job against Iran and Hezbollah. Every time he yields to Trump, his political rivals accuse him of turning Israel into an American vassal state. Every time he defies Trump, he risks losing the indispensable support of the United States. As for Trump, he has proven that he is willing to use extreme leverage, including the threat of total abandonment, to force Israel to comply with his agenda. The America First foreign policy has arrived in the Middle East, and it turns out it doesn't leave much room for the interest of allies. The June 6th to 8th communication breakdown wasn't just a spat between two volatile leaders. It was a stark revelation of the new geopolitical reality. The days of unconditional U.S. support for Israeli military adventures are over, at least as long as Donald Trump is in the Oval Office. And there is a deal to be made. So the next time you get into a screaming match with your business partner in the parking lot, just remember, it could be worse. You could be trying to manage a war in the Middle East.